The One-Winged Angel is many things: an icon, an inspiration, a war hero, and a friend. An egomaniac, a war criminal, an outspoken enjoyer of genocide, and an eco-fascist. This man contains multitudes. But there remains one constant, one immutable truth. Whatever the goal, whatever the game, Sephiroth dresses to impress. He stands alongside the Final Fantasy VII crew as one of the most iconic characters in gaming, with himself also positioned as one of the medium's most recognizable villains. That notoriety owes a great deal to his tragic, traumatic, melodramatic story and, of course, long list of ambitious eco-fascistic crimes against humanity and beyond. And then there's the Fits, which deserve just as much credit. Even if you don't know Sephiroth, the character, you know this guy. In fact, you can know a lot about this guy just by looking at him. And we have the eccentricity and character design chops of Tetsuya Nomura to thank for that. Final Fantasy's characters, formerly governed by the exquisite taste of Yoshitaka Amano, would be forever changed when he passed the torch to Nomura for Final Fantasy VII. Amano's signature style, wispy, flamboyant, androgynous, influenced by ukiyo-e, Art Nouveau, and European medieval fantasy, in turn influenced Nomura, but what really birthed his style was his fascination with the fast-evolving Japanese streetwear scene and the cultures it imported and celebrated. Nomura loves fashion. What he sees on the streets usually makes its way into his work. And what better streets than Tokyo's, one of the major fashion hubs of the world, a place where all styles come to mingle with Japanese craftsmanship. Sephiroth's fits are themselves a product of Eastern and Western fashion influences because Japanese fashion and role-playing games in general were and are greatly influenced by cultural movements and fashion worldwide, interpreted through a local lens. And so too was the work of Amano, a big character design influence for Nomura. In this video, we're unraveling Sephiroth, or his clothes, rather, where he got them and what they say about him. We're celebrating fashion's role in character design. Anyway, fit check. Tall, pale, and pretty, with long, luscious silver locks parted down the middle. The one shampoo bottle per shower hairdo was meant to contrast Cloud's original look, aka Zack's current look. But still, if Cloud Strife is on one end of the spectrum, then Sephiroth's elegant, ephemeral looks put him firmly on the other. The child of this person, and this person, Sephiroth was understandably a terrible Cetra, for reasons obvious to players, but an extraordinary fighter. He cut his teeth on conflicts of all kinds, gaining renown, respect, and, most importantly to him, a sense of belonging, friends, purpose. The violent arm of a megacorporation killing for the sake of better quarterly earnings, but home is home, I guess. As a soldier first class, he was allowed a few more luxuries than the average grunt, most notably his sartorial privileges. Sephiroth chose a black leather trench coat to elevate his uniform. Its length, the drape, along with his long hair and slim figure, contribute to a more refined, androgynous look, to contrast with the bulkier, unbalanced Cloud. Arms scandalously exposed and a large slab of iron someone convinced him was a sword. It's not very roomy in the torso area, with only the top buckle fastened, straining to keep those rippling muscles in, and in later iterations, cinched at the waist via a belt, a detailed insignia emblazoned into its buckle. The coat is decorated with two segmented metal spalders and sits over the rest of the traditional soldier attire. The top is open to expose the soldier belt hiding underneath with the suspenders crossed. Loose standard-issue black pants are tucked into his black knee-high leather combat boots, secured by two buckled straps or metal bands. Oh, and the double belt too, essential. Finally, black leather for the gloves, a metal band on each wrist, of course. The mid-90s saw the changing of the guard as Yoshitaka Amano stepped down as the franchise's main character designer, allowing Tetsuya Nomura to spread his wings. Some fans lament the move away from the silky, expressive elegance of Amano to the more angular, exaggerated punk flavors of Nomura's characters. But he's always had a healthy respect for the old. He continued Amano's tradition of bridging Japanese styles with those of the West, namely European high fantasy. Art Nouveau and ukiyo-e aside, Amano's addiction is European knights. but you'll seldom find any clunky, clumsy representations of knights in his portfolio, and his inspirations love him for it. Michael Moorcock, author of the Elric series, claims that Amano was the only artist at the time who could capture the haunting beauty of the series' protagonist, Elric of Melniboné. Whereas other artists struggled to break away from the more masculine stereotypes, Amano's flowing fabrics, colors, and androgynous looks brought the perfect energy. At home, his takes on costuming were the foundation on which Nomura built his style, and really was the cornerstone for a decent chunk of modern JRPG fashion. All aspects of Sephiroth, from the coat to the hair to the medieval-esque armor, are directly or indirectly inspired by Amano and Western fashion tastes, trends, and history. JRPGs have tapped into Western fantasy for a long time. Just look at the popularity of franchises like Wizardry, Ultima, and Call of Cthulhu in Japan. European armor channels the fantasy part of the science fantasy experience and is effective shorthand for, well, this guy fights real good with a sword. For all his otherworldly charm, Sephiroth's ethereality remains encased in, weighed down by, the military elements that define his character early on and ground his original look. The tragedy being that his entire self-worth hinged on lies he was told and the truth he wasn't. When he learned about these cells in his body, well, he wasn't so comfortable in his uniform anymore. He can personalize it all he likes, but prison is still prison. Believing he's loaded up with Cetra cells, Sephiroth begins his holy mission to exterminate humanity and save the world as its new eco-fascist messiah. But before that happens, before Sephiroth and Final Fantasy VII happened, we met his real parents. Now, prior to the 1980s, Japan's presence on the global fashion scene, specifically their contributions to modern fashion, it was rarely felt. The efforts of designers like the late Takada Kenzo and Issei Miyake put Japan on the map in the early years, but it wouldn't be until 1982 when the scene would be flipped on its head. That year, two soon-to-be pillars of the Japanese fashion world joined the assault on the status quo dictated by the Parisian elite. They were Rei Kawakubo and Yoji Yamamoto, the godmother and godfather of modern Japanese fashion. Rei Kawakubo was born on October 11, 1942. Her earliest memory of fashion was of navy white and polka dots. Whatever playfulness and whimsicality this might have betrayed didn't survive for very long. She graduated from Keio University with a degree in fine arts and aesthetics in 1964 and quickly found work as a stylist in the advertising department of major chemical company Asahi Kasei. By 1967, she was a freelance stylist, one defined by her unusual tastes, or rather, her distaste for the fashion norms, gender norms, really norms of all kind. In fact, she had so much trouble finding pieces she wanted for her clients that she just started making them herself. From this came the legendary fashion label Comme des Garçons, started in 1969 and named like it is for no other reason than she liked how it sounded. The brand was rebellious, anti-establishment. It was all about genderless garments defying expectations, with shapeless forms and flowing fabrics that swallowed and transformed the wearer. And also, it was all black, at least in these early years. Her impact on fashion went beyond sneaking the color into every notable designer's toolkit. She flipped fashion on its head, and has continued to do so. You could say the same about her counterpart at the time, Yoji Yamamoto, a man anointed by the industry as the king of black. Yoji Yamamoto was born on October 4th, 1943. He graduated school a lawyer, though he never worked a single day as one. In fact, he didn't want to be a part of regular society at all. Instead, he spent his time helping his mother, a seamstress, at her shop, and eventually she had him enroll in Bunka Fashion College, so he graduated for the second time in 1969. The women that frequented his mother's shop wanted what Yoji called bitches clothing, essentially clothes for the male gaze. He envisioned a different type of femininity, strong, independent, witchy. Now the second great evil to Yamamoto was perfection. Similar to Kawakubo, he sought asymmetry, distressing, deconstruction. He wanted interesting silhouettes to hide the shape of the body. And he wanted black. Though his clothes are designed and made in Japan, purely Japanese is not how he'd describe his work. Certainly elements of Japanese aesthetics like wabi-sabi are pillars of his design philosophy, but his clothes are also steeped in Western influences, just not ones governed by society's elites. He was more likely to draw inspiration from historical sources like German photographer August Sonder, who snapped portraits of everyday people. The pair, plus Issey Miyake, took Paris by storm in 1982, and Paris was not happy about it. The push was spearheaded by Comme des Garçons' second offering, the infamous Destroy collection that debuted black, distressed, shapeless clothes to the sounds of raging war drums. Instead of clothes that showed off the body, the models themselves were assimilated into the clothes, thus becoming part of the art itself. One through line among both critics and curious admirers was an idea branded Hiroshima chic, that their collections were a commentary on or a response to the atomic bombs dropped on Japan during World War II. Now, only Miyake was open about the influence of the war and the post-war experience shaping his creative vision. Both Kawakubo and Yamamoto vehemently deny this. They consider it a misunderstanding of their work and an attempt to flatten and shape it into something digestible or suitable for the Western palate. While Yamamoto cared more about doing his own thing than warring with Paris, Kawakubo, with her rebellious spirit, thrived off of the international fashion community's bitter response to her work. After all, they had successfully disrupted the status quo, which she decided she liked very much. Here's the traditional soldier unit. Here is Sephiroth. You could say that he takes from his anti-fashion role models in his own perverted way. Shinra ruined his life before it even started, and in the process, their evil begot more. Sephiroth hopped up on Genova juice, rejected Shinra's Gaia, and worked towards, well, putting a second impact-sized hole in the planet and wiping out humanity. That drape, that silhouette, that layering, channel Kawakubo and Yoji. Continuing where we left off, his look was already everything other soldiers' uniforms were not. Theirs emphasized the form of the muscle-bound fighter underneath, and they needed every pound of that muscle to keep these bulky things from crushing them. He did the opposite. Sephiroth's fashion choices didn't just help him shine, it allowed him to shine in spite of the uniform. He didn't fit so snugly into that mold, he had bigger things in mind, and you can tell. When you find him in the Mako cocoon, he's shed the uniform entirely, a symbolic gesture, having been promoted from Shinra puppet to the worst guy ever. What's interesting is that his classic pre-godhood outfit is absurdly symmetrical, which is not Super Yoji or Kom. While Cloud was heavier on one side than the other, Sephiroth had everything in pairs, perfectly balanced, right down to the bangs. When the so-called truth came out and the shackles came off, so did his need to conform. This new asymmetry with the wing, with his safer form, came to play a bigger role, as both a symbol of his rebellion and a glimpse into his messed up little heart. Like Japan's greatest designers, Sephiroth is also all about black. And for him specifically, you don't need to think too deeply about it. In our post-Kingdom Hearts world, Sephiroth is most famously depicted with his single black wing out, its meaning as simple as it can get. Black wing equals evil. So says the developers. He's unbalanced, unfinished, lost in limbo and searching for something to cling on to or a target for his angers. His looks highlight his otherworldliness, foreshadows, then reinforces his anxieties regarding his place under Shinra, and ultimately betrays his spiraling mental state, the torrent of hatred and confusion that consumes him and drives him towards further evils. Post-Final Fantasy VII, Tetsuya Nomura would start cranking out more designs that would eventually inspire all the memes surrounding his fashion choices. As technology improved, Nomura could afford to accessorize his characters, his all-too-infamous overuse of belts and buckles and the like. Sephiroth, who's made countless appearances in Square Enix properties and beyond, has been called back to the stylist chair numerous times himself. Back in Japan, the disciples of Rei Kawakubo and Yoji Yamamoto, dubbed the Crows, espoused their rebellious, non-conforming views of the brands, their clothes a symbol of their dedication to the lifestyle, proof that they've embraced the ethos of this cultural movement. Japanese streetwear continued to evolve with Comme des Garçons and Yoji Yamamoto as important keystones. 80s and 90s youth would experiment with different silhouettes, styles, vintage clothes, cross-dressing, and pick up new hobbies, their clothes a reflection of their interests, values, and lifestyles. And this is the era that Nomura grew up in. Around the time they were fighting in Paris, this guy, Hiroshi Fujiwara, was immersing himself in the budding Tokyo music and fashion scenes. But even Tokyo couldn't satiate him, so he hit up LA, New York, London. He documented all of this, the latest on hip-hop, punk, sneakers, brands, in a monthly column called Last Orgy in Takarajima magazine. One of his most dedicated readers was a guy named Tomoaki Nagao, or as most people know him, Nigo, a member of the Teriyaki Boys and founder of a little brand called Bape. But before that, his pal Jun Takahashi, of Undercover fame, hooked him up with a gig as Fujiwara's assistant. All of this went down during the early years of what would be the Urahara movement, named after the backstreets of Harajuku where Japanese streetwear underwent puberty before becoming the global phenomenon it is today. And it sits just a few kilometers away from Square Enix HQ. The Urahara movement imported and popularized a ton of cultures and styles from outside of Japan, from hip-hop to skate to Vivienne Westwood-inspired punk to French casual. Their DNA still present in Japan's streetwear scene today. And Nomura still got his ear to the ground. Take Neo The World Ends With You. While doing character design on the game, Nomura had his eye on social media to stay up to date with fashion influencers and trends popular with the youth. Since Nomura's been contributing character designs, Final Fantasy has always been a friend to fashion. Final Fantasy XIII's characters dripped out in Prada graced a 12-page spread in Arena Homme Plus in 2012. Lightning also played a part in Louis Vuitton's Spring-Summer 2016 rollout, including this weird interview with The Telegraph. Publisher money moves aside, Hiromu Takahara's Rowan lent their punk rock street-inspired sensibilities to the Final Fantasy XV boys' outfits, plus work on Nomura's Verum Rex and by extension Kingdom Hearts 3. The late designer is also immortalized in Neo The World Ends With You as the store owner of Black Honey Chili Cookie, an in-game brand based off his own brand of the same name. And of course, Luna Freya's dress from Final Fantasy XV was a design by Vivienne Westwood herself. It's a couture design from the gold label Autumn-Winter 2014-2015 collection. In the early aughts, Nomura's characters, including Sephiroth, adopted more colorful, exaggerated looks. Subcultures like Y2K and Visual K certainly lent their aesthetics to his work during this time. Big and colorful hair, androgynous looks, black, splashes of red and blue and purple, layers of makeup, a plethora of accessories, and over-the-top everything sure sound like something Nomura would like. In Kingdom Hearts, Sephiroth grows a purple wing with a messy, feathery underlayer evoking his safer form. 2 red bat wings adorn his forearms, red accents trace the edges of his coat, and of course, the hair. His look in the Dissidia series gives us a touch of lavender as well, his outfits adorned with materia orbs and beads, along with more intricate takes on his existing armor pieces, channeling Amano's interpretation of Sephiroth. This look stuck around for a while. His presence in these other games was not as consequential as his role in Final Fantasy VII, to say the least, but the shift to a more playful tone afforded Nomura the opportunity for more playful designs. For these looks, subtlety went out the window to make room for a maximalist hodgepodge of fresh colors, Nomura's own stylistic flourishes, and motifs borrowed from these new street fashion inspirations. They help cast an impossible-to-ignore spotlight on the patented rebellious, edgy brand of the One-Winged Angel, and with Kingdom Hearts, that one wing, much to the chagrin of some fans, was made synonymous with Sephiroth's brand. But for a fair representation of Nomura's evolution, we can compare the original designs to his new look in 2020's Final Fantasy VII Remake. The belt is the obvious star here, infinitely more ornate, with a wing motif etched into the buckle, small feathery charms hanging off of it with the subtle glow of materia. We can't even really say this is a belt anymore, maybe like 5, reminding us that Sephiroth is a natural-born fashionista, excelling in avenues outside of murder. There's extra metal accents and something of a debossed pattern on his coat that evokes the life stream or even cells. And the softer, less angular hair casts a stronger spotlight on his ethereality. Nomura seems comfortable with his shapes, his silhouettes, but his other influences really make themselves known in the details. A few fresh ideas, motifs, and inspo to breathe life into an old fit informed by Kawakubo and Yamamoto. Tetsuya Nomura understands that streetwear has never been just about clothes. Streetwear is effectively merchandise for street culture movements. In its purest, uncorrupted form, a brand has a certain ethos. It represents a lifestyle, a philosophy. By wearing the clothes, you endorse and embody the values of the brand. You add yourself to these story threads that continue to be woven every day based around those interests and ideas. Like the late Issei Miyake said, clothing is the closest thing to all humans. All design intersects. There are no boundaries between art, design, and other creative activities. Personal style can do a lot to represent your character, your best qualities, maybe even your worst ones if you're not careful. And in the world of video games, this rings doubly true. When Sephiroth spreads his wing, dons his sleek metal armor, and steps out with all black leather everything, you get a piece of the Sephiroth that Shinra wants him to be. A piece of the Sephiroth that he wants you to see, and something else festering in the shadows. Professional, loyal, ethereal, untamable, evil. And you can get a sense of it all in a matter of seconds.